In 2014, a very angry young man stabbed 3 of his roommates to death, entered a sorority house at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and shot 3 women to death. He left behind one thing, an 107,000-word manifesto emailed to his friends, family, and therapists titled "My Dark and Twisted World." In this document is many chilling and disturbing lines, but I want to draw your attention to one in particular. He says, and I quote, "All those beautiful girls I've desired so much in my life but can never have because they despise and loathe me, I will destroy. All of the popular people who live hedonistic lives of pleasure, I will destroy because they never accepted me as one of them. I will kill them all and make them suffer, just as they have made me suffer. It is only fair." This case would enter the popular imagination as the 2014 Isla Vista massacre, and the man who committed it would be considered a saint in his community. Now, I'm very strategically not using his name in a technique that the press calls strategic silence. In order to not amplify the voices of these men, in order not to deify them further within their communities and create copycat murderers, I choose strategic silence. Now, this man is what we now know as an incel, a portmanteau of the words involuntary and celibate, referring to an emergent online community of men who resent women by virtue of the belief that they have caused them a lack of sex and romance. At their most innocuous, these men sit on sites like 4chan and Reddit, lamenting their sexlessness, but as their scariest and most militant, as in the 2014 Isla Vista massacre, they create large-scale massacres and terrorize women. Incels are a small part of the larger picture of today's talk, something I want to draw your attention to, which is the increasingly scary trend of violence against women moving from the private to the public sphere, something I argue ought to be considered as terrorism. Now, this shift manifests in 3 distinct and key ways. First is the subject of the violence, moving from an intimate partner to any woman. Next is the location of the violence, moving out of private homes and into public spaces. And finally, the message of the violence shifting from a warning for one woman to a political warning to every woman. Now, the Isla Vista massacre is the most well-known incel mass shooting to occur in the US, but these actually occur all over the place. 4 years later, in 2018, a man rammed a van into a crowded Toronto street, killing 10 people. In posts leading up to the attacks, he described it as the continuation of the 2014 Isla Vista massacre, and he hoped to, quote, continue the incel rebellion. A few years later, across the pond, a young man in England shot 5 people to death after viewing a plethora of incel-related content online. But let's take a step back. How am I an authority on this topic? I am in no way an incel, but I have chosen to study it as the topic of my senior thesis. As a result of this, it's become a topic I've grown incredibly passionate about. I believe it is academically understudied and socially underestimated. Now, when I tell people about the nature of my thesis, I often run into 2 comments. Wow, that's so interesting, or how is that political science? The former goes to show you the extent to which these men have pervaded popular culture. The incel lexicon has become widespread amongst Gen Z. Words like gooning, cucking, mewing, mogging, looksmaxing. While none of these words may sound real to certain members of the audience, rest assured they are very much real and hold very pernicious meanings. Take, for example, the word blank pilling. This has now been popularized in lingo to show someone's full commitment to something. One could say Sasha is so TEDx pilled. But really, at the core, this is the word black pill, which refers to the point in which a man who may have dabbled in inceldom prior fully commits to the message and decides to commit mass terror against women. So these words that we're using day to day in our classrooms and lives actually hold really dark and pernicious meanings and further amplify a community on the margins of society. In regard to the second comment of how is this political science, well, I argue that this is terrorism. And this is terrorism that is occurring actually all over the world. It's globalizing in many forms. I want to draw your attention to 2 more case studies in countries. The first is the widespread trend of acid attacks in India. Second is the emergent Ire-Na movement in South Korea, which have been described most closely as Asian incels. Acid attacks is the act of throwing sulfuric acid at a person's face to maim and desecrate them, using irreversible damage. Now, what I want to draw your attention to is the fact that this form of violence used to be committed privately between intimate partners. Say a husband is upset or believes that his wife has cheated on him, or something as simple as she were to seek higher education that he did not approve of. That would be cause for an acid attack. Increasingly, however, any man is throwing acid at any woman he believes has dishonored him. Take, for example, a recent case where a woman rejected a man's advances in a northern province of India, and he threw acid at her. What is at the crux of this, what is so scary, is this belief in punishment. that a woman, by virtue of asserting the right to not take someone out on a date, deserves to be punished. This is a part of a larger trend and a larger problem of the impediment of the autonomy of a woman. At the crux of both incel mass shootings and acid attacks is the belief that someone is owed access to a woman's body. In the case of incel mass shootings, they believe they are owed sex by women because that helps increase their masculine capital. When a woman chooses not to have sex with them, they decide to shoot women. In the case of acid attacks, it is the belief that if you are dishonored, the only way to regain that honor is to desecrate a woman to irreversible effects. Now, what makes these cases so scary is the seeming randomness of it. That by virtue of existing as a woman and walking down the street, you could be a target of a mass shooting, you could have your face desecrated by sulfuric acid. The randomness is what makes the next case study I want to draw your attention to so scary. In South Korea, there's been an emergent group called the Irenam, which translates very directly to men in their 20s. Now, I imagine many of the people in this audience are men in their 20s who have no desire to commit misogynistic terrorism, but these men have actually caused such misogynistic terrorism. I want to draw your attention to a case in a public bathroom in 2016, whereby a man waited for over an hour for any woman to enter so he could kill her. This man ended up stabbing a woman after 1 hour of waiting. This occurs within a larger backdrop. It is politically salient. This happens as the People Power Party gains popularity in 2022 and wins office. This group has been described as the most populist anti-feminist group in Korean politics, and were able to mobilize the Irenam using their grievances. One such promise they made during that campaign was to dismantle the gender ministry. These attacks also occur alongside an uptick in sex crimes throughout South Korea. Take, for example, semen terrorism in Mocha. Semen terrorism is exactly as it sounds and refers to the act of smearing semen on a woman's items or even herself. A case that grew popular in South Korea was when a male coworker smeared and ejaculated semen 6 times into a woman's cup because she rejected his advances. Now, when this case went to court, which it did go to court, South Korea only ruled for property damage, saying that he, quote, ruined her coffee mug. There was no charge of sex crimes. This brings me to the next example, which is Mocha, which translates directly to small hidden camera. This refers to the over 30,000 small hidden cameras found throughout South Korea in public bathrooms and has led to the counter movement, My Life Is Not Your Porn. South Korea, in the face of public misogyny, in the face of a populist anti-feminist movement, were able to mobilize over 16,000 women to go out into the streets to argue for their right to be able to use a bathroom without being filmed unconsensually. Now, that example I brought up a little bit earlier, that public bathroom stabbing, again, using strategic silence, I'm not going to name the man, but he eventually was arrested and sent to 30 years in prison. Upon interrogation by the police, he gave a very chilling statement that you'll see actually echoes the statement I opened with in the 2014 Isla Vista massacre. He says in court documents, "Women beat me on the shoulder in the subway, deliberately blocking my way and walking slowly to make me late. Women throw cigarette butts at me. I've endured all these microaggressions, and I felt I could not stand them any longer. They had bothered me even in my workplace. I thought I'd die if I stay like this, so I thought I would kill first. I cannot stand being hurt anymore." This goes to show the extent to which the entitlement to women's bodies is a global issue. It's taking on many shapes and forms. But where do we go from here? How do we prosecute such cases? Well, oftentimes they're prosecuted as hate crimes, which the Department of Justice defines as a crime motivated by bias against race, color, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. What I argue they ought to be charged as is terrorism, which is defined as a violent act that intends to intimidate or coerce a civilian population. But what happens when the population you are intending to coerce, the population you want to intimidate and stoke fear in, is half of the entire population, is an entire gender? Well, then that's what I argue is misogynistic terrorism. Political scientists rarely ever agree on anything, and one such contested thing is what we define terrorism as. Definitions ranging from many respected IR scholars to the Encyclopedia Britannica have quaint variations, but there's always one overlapping word: fear. When we think about how scary terrorism is, it's often because of the randomness of it. People walking into the Twin Towers on 9/11 probably didn't think that was their last day going to work, their last day kissing their children goodbye and sending them off to school. But there is nothing random about violence that seeks to enter women's spaces, women's safe spaces, for the sole purpose of killing us. There is nothing random about a man who enters a sorority house in Isla Vista, or a man who enters a women's aerobics class in Collier Township, Pennsylvania, or a man who enters 2 different Asian spas in Atlanta, Georgia, for the sole purpose of killing Asian women. There is nothing random about that. That is misogynistic terrorism. Let's take a moment to breathe. And I bring your call to action. As violence against women is beginning to take the contours and shapes of terrorism, as men like Andrew Tate are growing popularity, as the incel lexicon is spreading into our classrooms, I could only ask for one thing: your attention. I can ask that you phone up the Prime Minister of India to talk about acid attacks and how to better protect against them. I cannot ask that you go onto an incel subreddit, try to speak some sense into these angry young men, but I can ask you to pay attention. To pay attention to an increasingly scary trend of violence against women leaving the household and entering the streets. Of the victims not only being intimate partners, which is horrific enough, but any random woman who exists as a woman, and that the purpose of this violence is to punish women, to stoke fear in us by the very virtue of our gender. That is misogynistic terrorism. It is a growing threat that knows no borders. And all I can ask of you, all that any woman can ask of you, is for you to pay attention. Thank you.